You're listening to LeaderCast, episode 152. Welcome to LeaderCast, Transforming Missions podcast with Tim Bias and Sarah Thomas, providing you with insights and resources you need to lead a movement of Jesus followers. Today we're having a conversation with Barbara Fillion. Barb is a leader in the local church, a leader in the West Ohio Annual Conference, and as you'll hear her talk about today, a leader in putting her faith into action through political campaigns. As a reminder, you can find show notes for this episode at transformingmission.org/podcasts. Look for episode 152. Now here's our conversation with Barbara Fillion.
Hi, Barb. Welcome to LeaderCast. Just to get us started, just with an introduction, would you tell us who you are and really what occupies your days, or where do you give your time?
So Barbara Fillion, and I am a member at Hyde Park Community, and I have really in this season been focusing on political campaigns. It's been kind of interesting. I joined 2 years ago a newly formed political action committee that has a goal of increasing the number of women in state and local office, elected office in Ohio to 50% by 2028. And I'm now on the board. So I have a friend to thank for getting me involved, getting me to give lots of money. And then because I've met so many amazing, mostly young women who have the chutzpah to run for office, I've spent a lot of time both on campaigns and on the PAC. It's interesting. I'm still, thank you, Sarah, chairing missions and outreach from that 1 year you asked me to do 10 years ago, but whatever. And I'm now on 2 conference boards, on the board of the newly formed foundation and pensions and health benefits. And in our spare time, we're building a new house. But other than that, I'm not doing much.
I was going to say, so Barb, really, what occupies your days?
Yeah, I mean, other than that, just Zoom and Facebook, right?
Well, thanks for the introduction. There's a question that we ask all of our guests, and in a real way, you've already answered the question, but I'm going to ask it in a different way. What does being a disciple of Jesus mean to you?
To me, I still think Wesley's 3 simple rules are the answer. Do no harm, do good, stay in love with God. Some days it's hard to do no harm. Always lots of opportunities to do good. And sometimes harder to remember, I should be doing this. I should look like a Christian if anybody has a question about that. And for me, it's really all about making a difference in the grander scheme of things. Someone once said to me, you should probably think about how you measure that, because you probably want to make a difference in ways that you might not see in your lifetime, which I thought was probably the reason she was a consultant and I'm not.
Well, you've answered that. For me, you answered the question, and all the things that you've already mentioned that occupy your time. That's all part of who you are and how you live out being a Jesus follower. So I appreciate that. I think those folks who listen and who are listening to us now are probably smiling, because our next question focuses on your strengths and how being a disciple or living your life with those strengths. And there are people who are already saying, Barb Fillion is an interesting person. Would you just tell us what your 5 strengths are?
Yes.
As we have our conversation, that'll be important. So with your Clifton strengths, what are your top strengths?
So woo, there's a surprise. Activator, maximizer, arranger, and ideation.
So for the purpose of our conversation today, we wanted to focus in on your woo, because not only is it number 1, but we have seen, and you have already demonstrated how that woo gets played out. And WOO is an acronym for winning others over. And let me just share with those of you that are listening Gallup's definition of this talent theme so you have an understanding of what it is. They say that people exceptionally talented in the WOO theme love the challenge of meeting new people and winning them over. They derive satisfaction from breaking the ice and making a connection with someone. My question for you in that, which you all can't see me right now, but I'm smiling because I can't wait for you all to hear Barb's answer to this question is, what do you love about meeting new people?
Finding connection, right? So can I make a connection that helps make a difference? And I love being able to make random connections. I really had to make a conscious choice that if I was going to work on a bunch of women's campaigns this season, that I probably wasn't going to also work as hard as I wish I could on racial justice issues. And just as the campaign was finishing, I saw a post from one of Brad, our 30-year-old's high school buddies. Ashton is 3 years younger. He is an African-American who played football at Lehigh and recently graduated from UC's College of Law and is working, last I heard, in the office of the AG in Ohio. And he posted a pretty impressive rant about the Democratic Party. And I private messaged him a whole bunch of questions about it and another article and got another rant. And I'm like, I just really need to drive up to Yellow Springs and have coffee outside with you and have a conversation about this. That said, I also know that my state rep's legislative aide is moving to Cincinnati with his fiance, and she's going to have an opening in her office. I'm just not sure she can pay Ashton enough to get him over there. And he's probably better suited in the AG's office for what his long-term goals are. But I might try to connect them.
So you've just experienced Barb's WOO at work. Who am I meeting, and what are the connections, and where did they line up? And it may have been 5 years ago. You never would have thought that would be happening. And part of what we know about you and your life and leadership is that you are a leader, and you've named some positional leadership roles that you're taking, but you also lead in many, many ways. And so this part of our conversation, we want to talk about the 4 needs of the people who follow any leader. And this, again, it comes from Gallup and how they talk about leaders. People who follow need to build trust. They need their leaders to show compassion. They need their leaders to provide stability, and they need their leaders to offer hope. And part of what I love about what I get to do in helping to develop leaders and coach leaders is that every leader does this in unique ways because of how God has gifted them. We were talking before we hit the record button about your spiritual gifts, Barb, and how they align with your Clifton strengths. And just for clarity, when we talk about leaders, here's the definition that we're using. We're using the definition that a leader is anyone who takes responsibility for recognizing the potential in people and or processes and has the courage to develop that potential. So, thinking about your WOO talent, and I say this every time we have these conversations, you can't artificially separate out your WOO talent. So other themes of yours are going to come in, and that's absolutely okay. But we're trying to focus on your WOO talent theme so that folks can experience how you lead with that and what that looks like. We've got, I think, 4 or 5 questions to ask you about trust, compassion, stability, and hope. So Tim, you want to get us started with those?
I can and will. Barb, how do you win others over so they can trust you when it matters? How have you been doing that?
I like to know a lot of fact-based information. Like, one of the ways I like to make connection is having knowledge that benefits people. And in 2018, this is just an example, and I've used this a lot recently during the aftermath of the election. In 2018, my state rep was behind by 300 and some odd votes on election day, but there were about 1,800 provisional and late absentee ballots outstanding. At the end of that count, 10 days later, she was ahead by 56 votes, which automatically triggered a recount. And I got to be one of her observers. So I had no idea how the insides of the Board of Elections worked. And I feel so much better after seeing the insides. I know that's not always the case, that making sausage is not as good as eating it. But in this case, it was really cool to see how the sausage is made and to know that there is always a Republican and a Democrat in the room if there's a ballot out. There are 2 keys to the ballot room, and you can't open it without both keys. One belongs to an R, one belongs to a D. Same thing with emptying the ballot box at the Board of Elections. Same thing with curbside voting. It takes 2 people to come out and bring your ballot to the car. And so knowing that was huge. When people started to spew alternative facts, I could say, oh, no, that's actually not how it works. I feel really good about how our Board of Elections works. By the same token, we're building this new house in Claremont County. It's not like Hamilton County. And so I could contrast, both boards of elections have 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. Hamilton County's commissioners who fund the Board of Elections are not evenly, they're all Democrats. Claremont's are all Republicans. And Hamilton County learned from the primaries and the pandemic and significantly, like tenfold, expanded their capacity for early voting in person. And even though there were long lines, they moved really quickly. They could process maybe 600 people an hour. So a 400-person line got through in less than an hour. Claremont County had space for like 8 boxes before COVID, or ballot positions before COVID, and they made no move to expand their capacity. So I would get to the Claremont County Board of Elections to hand out slate cards, and there'd be 400 people in line, and that would be a 5-hour line. So it just was, it was helpful to be able to say, both their boards of elections look the same. They made different choices about how they made it easier to work. So that's my database thing. Never met a fact. Well, I can't say I never met a fact I didn't like. My weight is one of those. My COVID weight. And I think even being able to know how the church works, being able to say, so it's pastors and churches, it's DSs, it's bishops, it's here's what these 2 committees that I'm on do and how they work. And, so having facts and data and knowledge is one of the ways I try to build trust for people who are willing to listen to facts.
I like it. Thank you.
So as we move on to showing compassion, thinking about that network, how has your network that, as I think about what I know about you, that network that spans across barriers of time and distance and culture, how has that network helped you to maintain connection and build compassion with others?
It's been harder this year to be compassionate. And I have tried to, I'm going to admit to having built an echo chamber of like-minded people on my Facebook page, because I use the unfollow button much more frequently than the unfriend button. It takes a personal insult or multiple posts of dubious data to get you unfriended on my page. And I've had to consciously choose not to respond to some things that really lit my fire, as you can imagine. That and deciding I can't do it all. So from the compassion standpoint, I've channeled a lot of that into the women whose campaigns I worked on. It's interesting. We have met some people on our travels that we're in touch with on email and on Facebook. And last fall, pre-COVID, when we did a 3 national park trip, we managed to plug in one-day visits or overnight visits with 4 different people from literally all of them were different walks of life. The 2 former P&G colleagues were both in medically challenging situations. One of them had turned 90 April of 2019 and recently had just had to go into assisted living when we visited last fall, and recently passed away after a bad fall. So it was wonderful that we were able to get to see him. And then another who I worked with at P&G and is closer to John's age, but still half a decade ahead of him, is in kind of the fight of his life with pancreatic cancer. So, we've been able to stay in touch with him, but it was wonderful to get to see him early in his treatment last fall and to have that memory of that. So it's connecting with people. We met a pair of physicians who are married to each other when we were in New Zealand last year, early in the year, and have stayed in touch with them. And thank goodness they're both retiring in full, because he was an emergency room physician. and it just gave me kind of heart failure to email and say, how are you guys doing? And has Mark retired yet?
So part of what I'm hearing you say, and part of what I'm hearing about your woo coming out, is when you travel and when you go places, and even when you're back home, it's not just that you think about people, but you actually reach out and make those connections, and you actually say, hey, we're going to do this, or we're going to be in your area, so that you can see and be with the people and continue to build that connection. Not everyone does that.
And at one point on the trip, I said, oh, here's a person I completely forgot I should have tried to meet in person that I've known on Facebook through a mutual friend. Can we make one more trip by here? And John looked at me and went, no. And I hate to say that I missed connecting with a friend who lived in Tacoma when we were driving in and through and around Seattle. This was somebody from my Girl Scout troop in high school. So once I missed again, 2, but we got 4.
So you're hearing the network that spans across the barriers of time.
Barb, I think you've already answered part of this next question. Before I ask it, though, I want to say I know people who drop names because they just have met somebody, and when I met them, I did that. You don't drop names. You actually have interaction with the people you talk about. And that's part of what the woo and the connectional piece is all about. So, and thinking of it that way with the contacts you have, as I've listened now, contacts everywhere. How does having those contacts help you offer support to people when they need it?
Is this where I get to make an excuse for spending way too much time on Facebook? Because a lot of times I've seen, for instance, I saw Mary Sheldon at church send an email that said, the Center for Respite Care has lost their normal resource for eggs and milk. Does anybody have a connection? And I knew that my pastor friend, Mary Lehman at Ticoon Farm, was getting milk from the free store every week, and that I could probably get that milk to the Center for Respite Care. So I've done that. I've seen friends who are in cancer treatment complain about the lack of masking in their lack of comfort with getting out of the house to go get groceries. I have a friend I made through the Cincinnati Transit Network, which was a group of volunteers. If you've read about the grannies in Louisville that were meeting people at the bus station who were refugees seeking asylum, similar kind of group here in Cincinnati, which of course then had to disband because it was all old women like me and young men who spoke Spanish with COVID. But one of the gals that I met and worked with frequently on that has a host of pre-existing conditions. And literally her physician said, if you catch this, you will die. So literally, she's not left her apartment other than to walk outside along the riverbank. And so I know a couple of things she finds hard to get, and I'll like text her from Target and say, "Oh, oh no, it was Costco. Costco has Clorox wipes. Do you want some?" So I guess that's stability for some of my contacts.
I remember getting a few of those text messages. It wasn't about Clorox wipes. It might have been about ground beef or some other supply for the ministries that we were working on. But yeah, that absolutely is about providing stability, because you're recognizing the small things in people's lives that help them to remain stable and to offer where we're going now, to offer that hope of, yeah, somebody's thinking about me. So as we think about offering hope, you naturally do a lot of meeting and greeting. Okay, COVID aside, because that's affected all of us. When have you used your connections to spread good news and not gossip?
During campaign season. Come on. It's been interesting because I've worked with so many of these women. Hamilton County just elected our first female sheriff, and she beat her old boss 70-30 in the primary. So when I have heard gossip about her, because I know her from our endorsement interview for the Matriots, and I know her because I've made buttons for her campaign, about 600, I can say, oh no, seriously, Charmaine is the real deal. And she didn't just get fired because she's a lesbian and her boss is crazy. She also ran up against him on use of force. She pushed back on internal affairs investigation that ended up with the county spending $150,000 in a lawsuit settlement. So yeah, she ticked off her boss because she wasn't okay with the deputy's use of force in the jail when she was running it. That's an example. I will say I am learning a whole lot about the internal workings of politics, and a lot of that sausage is no fun to see being made. So yeah, that's where it's harder not to gossip.
From my perspective, we need more people like you involved in politics behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful for how you offer that hope to people like me, because I am learning a lot today.
Some of it you might not have ever wanted to know.
Oh no, it's all good. I'm thinking about how much I miss you and John right now.
Yeah, we miss you and Sarah.
So one other way that you might offer hope, and I'm hesitating, not because you don't do this, but just because I don't want to put words in your mouth. How does starting conversations with others inspire new ideas and offer hope?
Okay. We met Anna and Garrett, her husband, the public health guy, a public health guy, not a physician, when they came to the clergy crucible, and we taught clergy personal finance. We had a conversation with them then. And then I met her when we both started our first quadrennium on the Board of Pensions. And we began a tradition of agendaless breakfast before our meetings, which Zoom has busted open. I mean, COVID has busted apart. I think she was meeting with like her spiritual advisor, who said, here's your assignment. Have an agendaless meal with someone you want to get to know better. And she called and said, can you have breakfast before or lunch after? And I went, do we have a topic? She said, no, it's supposed to be agendaless. Of course, they never are. In any case, she's working as part of having been on the Board of Pensions she's been working with EY, Ernst & Young, on their work with young clergy and clergy finance, and has been part of creating this new package of specifically Wesleyan financial planning advice called Saving Grace. And I was so excited to see it because John and I had been using ancient materials from Larry Burkett, who died a decade ago. And you kind of have to adapt them to Wesleyan stuff, which, Sarah, until I worked with you on your DMin thesis, I don't know that I could have described it that way. So anyway, I'm excited to know about that and to get a chance to look at this new material.
That's awesome. So anything else that you'd like to share with us about how your top 5 are fueling your leadership in this season?
I'd encourage people to get involved with campaigns. I think it can be a Christian leadership kind of thing to do. And God knows we all could learn something new. It's kind of exciting.
Awesome.
I'm sure you've answered this question in some ways already, but it's just one of the questions we keep asking. What courageous decisions are you making right now as a leader?
So part of it is, what do I work on and what do I not work on? And that's always hard. I think it's probably time for me to transition out of leadership for missions and outreach, but I want to make sure that the person who comes in has the organizational memory around, especially around things like how we fund those programs, because there are some restrictions on them and because we got extremely creative during budget crunches. So I'd love to transition out of that, because I really do feel called to do some more personal work on racial justice. I was happy to, I can't remember what I read somewhere that was like, you can do it all, but you can't always do it all at the same time. And you're better off to pick what floats your boat and deep dive into that than to skip a rock over a pond on a handful of things that you never know well enough to be conversant on.
So part of your courageous leadership grows out of your self-awareness.
Some days. On a good day.
Which is also self-awareness.
Yeah. Or the self-awareness John helps with.
Well, you with your energy and all the interest in the things you do, it's wonderful. But it is a significant accomplishment. That those are my words. In the decisions that you make and what you participate in and what you don't participate in. So it's not a matter of have to have your hand in everything, even though you may want.
Yeah.
There's a place where you make the decision, and that's what I've heard you say.
Yeah. And that's been a learning experience, because I really want to do it all, and I'm having to realize I can't do it all well.
And none of us can. So we've talked about the season that we've been living in and the things that have been changing. But as you think about the last 3, maybe even 6 months, what are you celebrating that God's doing in your life and or leadership?
So I am excited to see what we can do with the foundation for West Ohio and how I can help Susan as she comes into leadership there. And I am looking forward to, once we get out of the campaign season, which really never happens in Ohio, but how I can work more on, you'll love this word, systematizing, creating a process for our Matriots members to connect more deeply with candidates who pique their interest. I've been so impressed with these women who will step up to run, especially in Ohio, where we are so gerrymandered that sometimes the best they will do is increase turnout and help the statewide offices get more votes. But they're going to lose because of the way our districts allow legislators to choose their voters instead of the reverse. Gerrymandering is a word I learned way too well in the last 2 years.
Well, again, I'm glad that you're involved in the process. We need more people like you in the process. What characteristics of other leaders make a good partner in leadership? As you work in partnership with others, what are the characteristics that work well?
I love to see people who are continuing to learn. Like, that's what's kept me energized through this season of not being able to travel and not being able to physically be in a room with people as often as I'd like, is being able to continually learn new things. I'm not sure I want to learn how to put people in Zoom rooms, but I'm really glad there are people who know how to do that. And that I'm working with them on a couple of different teams, both at the conference level and on campaign stuff. And for me, the work in process is always to listen before I jump in with a solution. So I really value people who are great at asking listening questions to understand the real problem. Somewhere on TV, I heard someone say that a good, strong definition of the problem is 90% of the way to solving it. I'm like, oh, I'm going to have to remember that because I want to just hop in and offer a solution. I'm very much a fix-it person, which I'm trying to learn not to be as quick to do that.
Huh. You want to jump in and fix it. I'm just looking at your top 5 again. Woo, activator, maximizer.
There's a shock, right?
Well, let's see here. I wonder
There's
where that
shock.
comes from.
I'm trying to grow my ideation strength.
Something tells me that it's already really active. It just may need to be applied in a different way or in a different space. And
right.
Are you ready for the rapid fire question? These are 10 fun, quick questions. They won't require much thought. That's why we didn't send them to you beforehand. And they're really designed to help the folks that are listening get to know you better and know you as a person. So,
okay.
Barb, what's your morning beverage of choice?
Coffee.
Just black?
I have gotten a little more into flavored creamers lately. Just a little pop of sugar with my caffeine.
What is your favorite or go-to Bible verse?
I wish I could tell you the site. To those to whom much is given, much more is required. It's Luke 12 something B. It's 36 or 48.
What's your favorite season and why?
Spring and or fall, because you can layer up and down and not completely freeze or completely sweat.
When did you get your first Bible?
Oh, it was probably my 3rd grade Bible at church. Do you want the church? Whitehaven United Methodist, which doesn't exist anymore.
And that's in Memphis, right?
It is in Memphis.
Mm-hmm. What do people misunderstand about you? I've got a long list.
Yes, you could go for that.
I'm kidding.
Oh, that list could start and end sometime tomorrow. Gosh, maybe that I really care deeply. Sometimes when I jump in to counter an argument, perhaps that compassion is not the first thing people see. Or maybe how I do nurturing leadership that sometimes involves a kick in a hard place. I don't always nurture well.
You nurture differently.
Yeah.
It's the end result that counts.
Right.
What is the last thing that you have read?
Oh, I'm reading The New Wilderness, which is really funny because I started reading it and John looked at it and went, "When did that come in? I asked you to get that from the library." It's a fascinating book. It's fiction and prescient, both.
I know you've been a lot of places, but what's your favorite vacation spot or place to relax?
Oh, gosh. Okay, those might be 2 different answers.
Okay.
Probably Melbourne and Queenstown are among our favorite cities in the world, but they just take so freaking long to get to. My goodness, we might not get there again in our lifetimes because that 17 hours on a plane is just brutal. And the 12-hour layover in LAX on the way home. We are mountain people, not beach people. Forests, not lakes. And my favorite place to relax is the porch on at our cabin in the woods.
I was getting ready to say, I bet there's a place at home that's fun to relax.
Foothills of Appalachia, just watching the birds and the fog in the valleys.
What brings you joy these days?
Well, it's always people and networking. And we're having fun building this new house. We've never done a completely custom house, and I am eternally grateful that that builder includes the services of a full service designer, because we can say, give us the short list of our choices. We don't need to see everything in the showroom. And she's been wonderful at it.
What music brings you meaning or peace?
Oh, It's funny. Where was I where they were doing a hymn sing the other day? There was a Jeopardy category on hymns that was like, I got all of these. It's funny. We aren't listening to that much music. And we miss going to the symphony and going to, live theater as well.
Last question. Favorite part of Christmas?
Well, in a normal year, it's seeing our whole family. And because we're doing it at the cabin now, most years, we aren't going to a service at Hyde Park. But candlelight service normally is a favorite part of Christmas.
Any last words that you would like to share with our listeners?
So, no, this is fun. It was fun to pull out my spiritual gifts and see how they are so consistent with my strengths finders. And I'm in ENFJ, and that's a what you see is what you get from a Myers-Briggs standpoint too. So I guess that's consistent. I'm one of those people that all the personality things line up together.
You are who you are.
That's for sure.
Tim, any last minute words?
Barb, out of the years that I've known you, I'm a better person because of you.
Oh, bless your heart. That's
and I don't want anything from you. I'm just telling you. And I'm reminded of that and how much I miss you by this conversation. So I'm grateful. What I'm hoping is that people who are listening to us will look you up and get to know you.
There you go.
Well, I mean, I can say this because I've experienced it, and that is anyone that has any interaction with you is a better person as they have that interaction. And so I'm grateful. Thank you.
Well, that's too kind. Thanks. You made my day with that.
Well, thank you, Barb. Thanks for being a part of this and sharing your journey in this season of your life and leadership and all that you are doing. And I do hope that you have a very Merry Christmas, whether it's at the cabin with the whole family or just you and John, that you enjoy every minute of it. One of the many things that I love about interacting with people who have the Woo talent theme in their top 5, and especially with people like Barb who lead with Woo, is you always know that you're going to make connections with people with ideas, with experiences as you interact with them and have conversations with them. So here are my 2 questions that I would love for you to reflect on this week as you think about the conversation that you just heard. The first question is this: what connections do you need to nurture intentionally in this time? All of our connections in this past, 9 months now, as we have been navigating this pandemic, many of them have changed. And so take a few minutes this week and spend some time reflecting on who are the people that you need to spend some time intentionally nurturing your connection with. The second question that I have for you goes back to Barb's reminder about discipleship at the beginning of our conversation. I'd love for you to think about how your strengths are guiding you to do no harm, to do good, and to stay in love with God. As a reminder, you can find show notes for this episode at transformingmission.org/podcast. Look for episode 152. Now go lead a movement of Jesus followers. Bye for now.